Breaking news is taking over the internet, and I promise you won't want to scroll past this. What happened has left fans stunned, the hip-hop community in complete shock, and the streets of New York buzzing like never before. Yes, Papoose, who is known for his loyalty, love for Remy Ma, and that picture-perfect ride-or-die image, was just arrested after a violent altercation that was reportedly all about a secret baby of betrayal behind it. Now, before you think it's just another celebrity couple feud, let me stop you right there. According to close insiders, the fight got so bad that police had to intervene, and witnesses claimed they had fist flu. Voices were raised, furniture was destroyed, and it all started with a revelation that has fans in a panic. According to sources, Papoose, who has been publicly supporting and loving Remy through thick and thin, found shocking messages and evidence that led him to confront her in an explosive scene that ended in complete chaos. However, he was unaware that the cameras were rolling and now footage. While some fans are questioning Remy's every move, others are defending. Their minds are spinning about how the most powerful couple in hip-hop could break up so violently and so publicly, but the real questions are, who is the baby's father? What drove Papoose, a man known for his calm, collected nature, to the brink of violence and arrest? Stay put because what follows will blow your mind away. Get your popcorn ready because this story is just getting started. The night had begun. Like any other, quiet, almost suspiciously so. It was one of those laid-back evenings in New York City, where the air feels heavy, like it's carrying secrets you're not supposed to, in the world of Remy Ma and Papoose. Secrets were building like a storm that no one could have predicted. They had just returned from a low-key industry dinner where Remy was being honored for her hip-hop legacy. And Papoose had stood next to her the entire time, grinning and applauding proudly. On the outside, it was picture perfect, with cameras flashing, couples complimenting their bond, and even fans whispering relationship goals. However, behind that proud smile, Papoose's chest burned with something that made him suspicious. It began with a single enigmatic direct message sent to Papoose's private Instagram. He didn't confront her right away. Instead, he sat with the message, studied it, and reread it 100 times in the dark, replaying every moment of the last few months in his mind, the late nights, the canceled dinners, the quiet sobs he thought he didn't hear from the bathroom that night after the event as Remy removed her heels. Anne let out an exhausted sigh in their bedroom. Papoose. The account was from an anonymous user with no name, no profile, and just one line. You ever wonder why Ree's been distant lately? Still frozen by the doorway, he asked, his voice calm to calm him down. Are you tired? He asked. Yeah, she replied without looking up. That event was a lot. There was a long, cold, heavy silence before he dropped the phone on the bed in front of her screen, which was still glowing with that blurred photo and the anonymous DM open. What's this? Remy asked, staring at it with a blank, cold pause and a scoff. Believe some random internet hater over me? But Papoose wasn't buying it tonight. I'm not asking what they said, he growled. I'm asking what you're hiding, and that's when it all started to fall apart. Remy had been acting strangely, not in public but behind closed doors. She had been avoiding emotional situations with Papoose, taking phone calls in the restroom and vanishing for hours with evasive excuses. It was during one of her studio sessions that she first met DeMarco, a former flame who was now a rep with a dangerous swagger and a flashy grin, one that she would regret but never be able to undo. Remy was at a loss for what to do when she received a positive pregnancy test weeks later. Papoose had been pleading for another child for years, and they had even discussed IVF. How could she admit when she didn't even know who the father was? She told him it was a miracle that God had finally answered their prayers, and Papoose believed her, but the guilt tore at her every time he kissed her stomach, posted those corny Instagram tributes, and declared, I'm the luckiest man alive. After Papoose dropped the phone on the bed, the air in that bedroom grew tense. Answer me, he said, his voice shaking. Is that baby mine? Remy got up slowly and defiantly, saying, "Don't do this tonight. Answer me." He yelled louder this time. And then the unthinkable occurred. He grabbed a framed picture of their wedding from the dresser and smashed it on the floor. Remy surmised, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Papoose was releasing years of suppressed love, sacrifice, and patience. In a single, violent wave, "You made me look like a damn fool," he yelled. "I've been out here defending you, loving you, and praising you, and this is what you do behind my back." Tears welled in Remy's eyes. "Tell me the whole damn truth," he shouted. Just then, the baby monitor crackled in the background, and a tiny cry reverberated. "Don't tell me that child isn't mine," he whispered, and Remy stood there, trembling. Papoose was aware that news spreads quickly in the entertainment industry, and by sunrise, bloggers had screenshots of the leaked messages, and websites were blazing with headlines about Remy Ma being caught in a secret baby scandal and Papa leaving cryptic comments on Instagram. However, nobody was prepared for what would happen next. That same afternoon, Remy was spotted at a family cookout in the Bronx, looking visibly upset. According to eyewitnesses, she spent the entire time pacing with her phone while crying and brooding, and then at 6:45 p.m., she was nowhere to be seen. A violent altercation broke out in the driveway of a mutual friend's house. Papoose had arrived unexpectedly, and he was accompanied by security, his brother, and reportedly even a private investigator who had located the man thought to be the baby's father, DeMarco. Words were exchanged, loud and accusatory, and then, suddenly, fists flew. Neighbors reported screams, broken glass, and people attempting to separate the men. One woman said she saw Remy yelling, "Please stop." As the two men Papoose's shirt was ripped, his lip was bleeding. And 3 adult men were holding DeMarco back when the police arrived. The officers moved swiftly, taking statements from witnesses who gave differing accounts, but it was obvious that Papoose had snapped his handcuffs and become enraged. He was led to the squad car where cameras flashed in all directions and fans screamed his name while others stood silent in shock. As he sat in the back seat of the police cruiser, he turned to the crowd and yelled, "I gave her everything, everything." Like that, the door slammed shut, and the NYPD cruiser's flashing lights faded into the distance. But the storm that had been left behind on that Bronx street was just starting to rise. Papoose was now under arrest, and the energy in the air changed. The silence that followed the altercation was almost louder than the chaos itself. And the paparazzi lenses were still twitching from capturing the arrest of a man who had once been hailed as the epitome of loyalty in hip-hop. Remy Mosfet was stiffly near the driveway, her makeup smudged, and her body trembled not just from the scene that had erupted, but also from the consequences that were just starting to set in. The sirens may have subsided, but the storm was only getting stronger as the video footage of the violent altercation started making the rounds on social media platforms. The footage was grainy, shaky, and filled with every fan, critic, and anonymous troll into the most private tragedy of Remy and Papoose's lives. The internet was flooded with screenshots of blurry images, half-finished comments, and unverified claims as Twitter trended within an hour under hashtags like #ReMMAABC scandal, #BA arrested, and #Who is the father major urban blogs and gossip. YouTube channels posted their own breakdowns, piecing together a timeline that most people had no right to create, but did so with the assurance of seasoned detectives. The main storyline spread like wildfire that Papoose had found out Remy Ma had a child that wasn't his, and after months of suppressing it, he finally snapped. They portrayed him as a man torn by betrayal, the story of a calm, devoted king being pushed to the edge by the very woman he had once waited 6 years for while she was in prison. The public's reaction to the situation splintered, with some people feeling sympathy. The debate blurred the lines between morality, masculinity, and the cost of fame as the streets hummed and social media boiled over. Papoose sat in a cold holding cell, handcuffed behind his back, bruises forming on his knuckles, the pain being both physical and emotional. There were no headlines, no commentary, just silence and a growing void in his chest after years of being the unshakable. They also highlighted his public devotion, his unwavering support, and the quiet dignity he always carried. All of that seemed to be shattered by the possibility of infidelity and lies. Remy had to seek refuge in her sister's house, away from the chaos, but it wasn't much quieter there either. Phone calls came in from family, friends, and journalists posing as either, and she didn't answer any of them. She just sat in silence, replaying every moment of the previous 9 months. The guilt weighed heavily, and what had started as a careless mistake months ago had turned into something monstrous, uncontrollable, and destructive. When she first realized she might be pregnant, the panic was immediate. The timing was off, and the situation was terrible. Circumstances worsened, and, most importantly, the uncertainty of paternity had haunted her. There was no graceful way to deal with it, so she made a decision that had now blown everything up. The media also discovered old interviews in which Ray talked about loyalty, love, and respect. These were now being reframed by bloggers and used as contrasts. For example, clips of her preaching about sticking by your man were now followed by explosive footage of her husband being dragged away in handcuffs. The irony wasn't just bitter, it went viral and Remy's fanbase split overnight, with those who had once admired her starting to doubt everything about her integrity and marriage. While everyone had something to say, a mystery remained in the background that prevented the online community from moving on from the baby. There had been no official statement about the child in question. No photos, no names, no confirmations. But now blog sites started looking into an old man named DeMarco, whom Remy had once been loosely associated with during a recording session. Motherhood. She wasn't just being judged. She was being tried in the court of public opinion, and she didn't really have a chance to defend herself. He was dragged into the spotlight when a picture of him holding a baby appeared. The timestamps, though they weren't verified, matched the timeline of Ree's pregnancy, and the rumor went viral, according to unconfirmed sources. DeMarco had a brief affair with Remy in the studio while Papoose was traveling for a show run. These same sources also claim that Remy had tried to hide it, but once the baby was born and questions started to mount, things started to fall apart. It was said that Papoose had been covertly gathering pieces and that the Bronx barbecue wasn't random, it was premeditated. Papoose was detained for several hours before being granted bail. Cameras waited outside the precinct like vultures as he left in silence, covering his face from the flashes and questions that came in with unrelenting rage. Reporters screamed over each other, publicists ducked and dodged, and fans held up phones in an attempt to get a glimpse of the broken man. He didn't say anything. He didn't wave. He just walked forward, bearing the weight of 100 headlines and 1,000 dashed expectations. That night, he didn't go home but instead vanished into the quiet of a hotel far from the city, where he stared at a reflection of himself in the mirror. Recognized that this was not the cool-headed strong man who had once proudly stood by Remy's side on red carpets, that this was a man who had battled to keep his marriage intact in front of the world, and that this was a man who was disillusioned, broken, and numb. Remy, on the other hand, was left in emotional lockdown. She had not been arrested or charged, but she felt imprisoned nonetheless. The media frenzy, the family backlash, and the betrayal etched on her husband's face were all around her like walls that she could no longer breach. No amount of pee or spin could make things right. What hurt most was not just the fact that she had built her life brick by brick, but that it had fallen apart in a single night. She had lost the man who had waited for her for years during her darkest days, and now he had vanished in darkness. The public collapse was followed by the private one. A loss of the baby's laughter in their shared home. The loss of those peaceful mornings that would never return, and thousands of messages pouring in, not of love, but of disappointment. The outcry only grew as fans demanded statements and TikTok theorists speculated about what would happen next. Some accused both parties of clout chasing, while others questioned whether any of the love they had displayed for years had been genuine at all. When Papoose's profile featured a single blacked-out Instagram story with no music or caption, fans flooded the comments section, asking whether it was a sign of heartbreak, withdrawal, or something bigger coming. 12 hours later, the next post appeared, with white text on a black background that read, "I'm speaking my truth, live tonight without filter." The internet braced itself, eager to hear what Papoose had to say after the arrest, the scandal, and the betrayal. For years, he had remained silent through everything. The model husband, the quiet supporter. But now the man behind the serene exterior was as the clock approached 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Millions of people turned to Papoose's Instagram. The buzz was electric, with every major blog influencer and hip-hop personality clearing their schedules. Countdowns were posted, reactions were queued, and even verified celebrities commented on the post teasing his live appearance. It wasn't just a statement that people were expecting. 'Twas a reckoning. This wasn't just another celebrity scandal. It was the implosion of a love story that had been regarded as untouchable. Papoose and Remy were hip-hop royalty. There, devotion, fortitude, and bond were the subject of music videos, interviews, and headlines. However, the illusion of perfection had been shattered, and everyone wanted to see how much damage had actually been done. By the time the live video began, over 800,000 people had joined, and the number continued to rise. Papoose appeared alone, sitting in a dimly lit room, his face clearly drawn. There was no stylist, set, lighting, or production, just a man at a crossroads ready to let the world in. What followed was raw, methodical, and deeply calculated. Didn't raise his voice. Instead, he spoke with a weight in his voice that made every sentence feel like a punch to the gut. He started by expressing his gratitude to his fans who had supported him for years, and then he went straight into the pain of the arrest and the months before it. He described the changes he had noticed in Remy Ma's behavior, including the distance, evasiveness, and signs he ignored because he wanted to believe in their story. He explained how he had always thought that love could withstand anything, including prison, fame, and pressure. But what he didn't anticipate was betrayal from within household. For a man who had built his legacy on integrity and loyalty, the revelation had not only broken his heart, but also his entire sense of self. He acknowledged the fight, but made no excuses, admitting that the confrontation got out of control and that his emotions exploded. But that the anger wasn't just about infidelity, but about years of loyalty being met with deception. His words resonated because they weren't defensive. He made reference to the baby, the paternity doubts, and how the final confrontation had shattered something inside him. Not just trust, but identity. They were introspective. He didn't portray himself as a victim or a villain. Instead, he stood in the ashes of what had once been a stable life and simply laid it bare. A man destroyed by the one person he never thought would break him. The comment section erupted as viewers wept. Some cursed Remy, some pleaded for reconciliation, and others simply flooded the chat with broken heart emojis. Finally, as the live stream came to a close, Papoose delivered the final blow. He had in fact taken a DNA test a few weeks prior. Having discovered the unopened envelope in a drawer and acting on his instincts, the results, he claimed, arrived 2 days prior to the altercation, and they confirmed what he had already feared. The internet went into a frenzy after he said the child was not biologically his. He ended the live stream with no outro, no tears, no theatrics, just silence. News outlets published article after article analyzing every sentence of Papoose's livestream headline, which screamed betrayal, heartbreak, and deception. Analysts, influencers, and relationship coaches shared their opinions. Psychologists conducted interviews explaining trauma responses. And fans started to unite under the new hashtag Justice for Pose. Asterisk by almost 600,000 in a single day. Her music was inundated with comments, the majority of which were harsh, and all references to loyalty or truth were turned against her by critics who now viewed her as a phony. The public outcry was unrelenting. It wasn't just about cheating. It was about betraying a whole story that people had emotionally invested in. Remy stayed silent, with no tweets, statements, or interviews, and her team declined to comment. However, in the digital age, silence only feeds the flames. And the public interpreted her silence as proof of guilt, with some insiders starting to spread more rumors. Claims that Remy's family was aware that the man in question, DeMarco, had allegedly gone to the hospital after the birth, and that Papoose had been trying to keep his mouth shut for weeks until the encounter at the cookout made restraint impossible. One source even asserted that Papoose had planned to separate discreetly, but the incident exploded before he could defend himself. While the world was consuming every frame of the story, something deeper was going on behind the scenes. The fight, although captured on camera, had not yet been fully processed legally. But now that the footage had gone viral, pressure was growing on authorities to press charges. And lawyers from both sides started to step in, threatening lawsuits even though no serious injuries were reported. Papoose, who had previously been a supporting character in industry feuds, abruptly became the focus of a moral discussion that went beyond music. It was about male vulnerability, emotional betrayal, and double standards in relationships. Panel shows, radio stations, and even morning talk shows his live Instagram appearance, which was replayed on television and cut into reaction videos across platforms. TikTok creators turned his words into audio tracks that flooded FYPs with heartbreaking and betraying scenes, and as the digital world ate up the content, business deals started to shift. Brands discreetly withdrew from Remy Ma's partnerships, bookings were canceled, collaborations were paused. And artists started distancing themselves out of fear of backlash, while Papoose, who had previously avoided the spotlight, found himself in the center of it by force rather than choice. Although he turned down most of the offers for interviews, documentaries, and even book deals, he accepted one televised appearance that had fans on edge, promising to reveal the whole story. Just when it seemed like the firestorm couldn't get any hotter. Another twist was leaked by an unnamed source, but this time it came from within Ree's own circle. A blurry photo of a second child, who looked to be around 2 or 3 years old, started to circulate with the caption claiming that this child also belonged to DeMarco and that Remy had been aware of the connection all along. The blogs went into overdrive, and the rumors started to veer into new areas. Had Remy been living a double life? Was the recent baby just the last straw in a string of secrets that had been buried? The idea of multiple betrayals sent the online mob into overdrive, and even supporters who had hoped for reconciliation started demanding accountability for Remy. There was no way out, and her team released a brief, chilly press statement that said that Mackie had no comment at this time and asked for privacy, but that wasn't an option. While the public praised his calmness, Papoose was deteriorating behind the scenes. According to friends, he was not eating, sleeping, or communicating at all, and had withdrawn almost completely from social interactions. Although he was described as resilient and stoic, the pain was overwhelming. He reportedly checked into a private wellness retreat upstate to find some space from the chaos. For someone who had centered his entire identity around family and commitment, losing both in one blow was more than just a PR nightmare. It was a personal annihilation. Some speculated that he was getting ready for a full divorce, while others implied that custody of the child he had been, though Remy had been silent in public. Those closest to her revealed a very different side of her behind the walls. They said she was devastated, barely speaking, and overwhelmed by what had happened, not just a public average, but the realization that she had truly lost Peps, the one person who had supported her through everything. Those close to her claimed she had hoped to explain everything in private. That the DNA test had confirmed her worst fears, and that she never wanted it to play out like this. But fear, shame, and the speed of the internet had sucked away any chance for reconciliation. The scandal had reached a fever pitch. And as she sat in the shadows watching the men she had once built her life with fall apart on live stream, she reportedly whispered to a close friend that she had no one left to blame but herself. However, at that moment, the story remained one-sided. A tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and consequences told through the eyes of the wounded Papoose. Remy Mahad remained silent, and the baby, the one truth at the center of this entire explosion, still had no say at all. Silence had become Remy Ma's only tactic, whether by choice or paralysis. The image of a strong, assertive woman who once commanded stages and interviews with unwavering confidence was replaced by the image of someone hiding not from the media, but from her own truth inside the walls of her hidden residence, away from Taif. I said the walls of her hidden residence, away from Taif. I said, by you, an image of a strong, assertive woman who once commended stays. M.F. while we come with cality. I said, M.O.2. While we said, I don't fig it. We said, two coats consuls commade. We said we commeen with we with kami with cree out at the camo key to set to me that we like it. We so to q to me so I can to so I can do you to I can with to you and I to week so you guide we got to you with up king to why we were and I guys have out the fake to see the cameras and the condemnation. She hardly moved, and her phone remained on silent, its screen constantly lighting up with notifications. She never dared open messages from friends, calls from family, and threats from strangers, all of which blurred into the same noise after she once unintentionally scrolled through her phone and saw a face, plastered over dozens of video thumbnails and TikToks that ruthlessly tore her apart throughout the city. After his live stream was cut off, the media rushed to fill, and the rumors that followed took on a life of their own. There were whispers that he was seeking custody of the baby despite the paternity results, claims that he had blocked all contact with Remy, and rumors that he was seeking custody because of the emotional bond he had already developed with the child. None of these were verified, but they didn't have to be. The truth had become less significant than the emotion it stirred. Public discourse had gone from anger to obsession, and people were no longer just responding to the drama. They were now analyzing it deeply into the timeline conspiracy threats about who in Remy's camp had leaked what and forensically veld comparisons of baby photos to rumored fathers over to digital platforms. Papoose had become a martyr of modern love, and Remy Ma had become a cautionary tale. Then, one night without warning, a new video appeared. It wasn't another live stream, and it wasn't shared by a celebrity or posted by a verified source. Rather, it came from a small account that was hardly followed. It was a shaky vertical video that was watermarked and was shot from the inside of a car window, but it captured a different angle. A moment missed in the chaos in the video's background showed Remy Ma holding a phone behind the yelling, screaming, and chaos. She wasn't just watching the fight happen. She was recording it. The implications were astounding. Blogs exploded with new headlines. Had Remy known the confrontation was coming? Had she baited it? Was she trying to protect herself or document evidence against Papoose? Was this whole incident more planned than anyone had thought? The video's virality dwarfed all previous clips, sparked a new wave of rage. And even some of Rhee's last remaining defenders started to lose their silent trust after it was lost. In a brief, barely audible excerpt at the end of the video, someone close to the camera was heard whispering a man's name. It's the same name that had been circulating weeks earlier in rumors and posts in speculation about DeMarco. It was a casual, almost dismissive whisper, but it carried the weight of a wrecking ball. And within hours, DeMarco's social media accounts disappeared. His name trended, his family was doxxed. And the man who had, up until now, remained a faceless villain in the story was abruptly thrust into the public eye with new layers of the scandal unfolding. DeMarco had been boasting in private circles for months, according to associates. Screenshots of him at parties with a child who looked remarkably familiar appeared, and a tweet from 2 years ago that had gone unnoticed was now pinned to every gossip thread. In one of the tweets, he joked about changing the DNA game forever. Whether the tweet was related or not, it didn't matter anymore. The internet decided that it was in the middle of the chaos and pressure on Remy that finally broke her. She didn't call her publicist or her team. Instead, she sat by herself in her bedroom where she had read the test results months earlier and opened the camera app without a ring light. She didn't post it to her main feed. Instead, she uploaded it to her story. It was a brief 2-minute video without a caption. She didn't defend herself. She didn't deny the betrayal. She didn't name names. She just acknowledged that everything had gone too far, that a man she had loved was now broken, that a child was caught in the crossfire of adult failures, and that no amount of silence could erase the pain she had caused. Her voice cracked, her face twitched, and she spoke as though she had already come to terms with the loss, not a temporary setback, but something permanent. The story ended in 24 hours, but it had remained unmoved, according to sources close to him who said he never even watched the story that he had made his peace not with Remy, but with the end of who they used to be, because he had finally realized that loyalty wasn't something you gave blindly. It had to be earned, maintained, and protected. The public wanted. Fans were split once more over her words, with some claiming it was too little, too late, and others arguing over whether she was seeking redemption or relevance. As for Remy, her silence returned after the video. She canceled upcoming appearances. Her PR team sent back generic responses. And her collaborators distanced themselves in a business built on the image that she was toxic, not because of the infidelity, but because of how deeply it shattered the narrative people once believed in. Just when it seemed like things had started to settle, a court document leaked, and Papoose filed a petition. More than anything, they wanted another live, another statement, but Papoose gave them nothing. Full custody of the child. The leak was devastating because it demonstrated that he had meant every word, that even though he knew the truth, he still saw the child as his own, and he wanted to protect and raise her, to keep her away from the chaos and deceit that had erupted around her. The public's reaction changed immediately, deepening the heartbreak. The story was no longer about a man who had been wronged by love, but rather about a man who chose to rise from the ashes and carry what remained of the innocent piece of a shattered life. Podcasts praised him as the epitome of a real one, and fans launched campaigns. In the days that followed, petitions appeared in Remy's name as well, demanding that brands acknowledge him, that the media give him flowers, and that his loyalty not be forgotten because of someone else's lies. However, these petitions weren't supportive. Instead, they demanded that Remy address the full truth, come clean, and either confirm or deny DeMarco's role. She gave people anything other than silence, but there were no answers, only more questions, more rumors, and more damage. By the end of the week, what had begun as a single violent altercation had turned into the most explosive in years, not because of the fight or even the infidelity, but because of how the world had been so engrossed in the fantasy of their love and how violently that fantasy had collapsed. The love story was over, but the story itself was far from over. The internet had moved quickly, but the wounds left behind weren't healing, as Papoose's petition for full custody had changed the public's perception completely. Instead of being the man who had been betrayed, he was now the man who still chose to take responsibility for a child who wasn't biologically his. In a world full of ego and abandonment, his decision radiated something deeper than loyalty. It was a heartbreaking, brutal and noble sacrifice, changed the public's tone completely. He was no longer just the man who had been betrayed. Instead, he was the man who continued to choose to take care of a child who wasn't biologically his in a world full of ego and abandonment. His choice radiated something deeper than loyalty. It was a heart-wrenching, brutal, and noble sacrifice. And while the public applauded his actions, the media knew that there was still one more question that needed to be answered. Where was the truth? The silence surrounding Remy Ma had offered emotion, yes, but with no real clarity, names, confirmations, or answers. Even silence has its expiration date. Late on a Monday night, a leak surfaced. This time, it wasn't a video, tweet, or rumor, but rather a recorded voicemail. A source close to both sides gave it to a gossip podcast, and within hours, it was all over the internet. The voicemail, which was crackling with raw tension, showed Remy Ma speaking to an unidentified person, though most people thought it was her publicist. In the audio, Rhee's voice trembled with defeat and rage. She didn't plead for forgiveness. She didn't claim her innocence. The internet broke again. Not because the truth was shocking, but because it was real, tangible, and irrefutable. And this time, no one could deny it. The rumors were over, the fantasy was buried, and the story was now called Brutal Fact. Remy Ma's supporters had diminished to a flicker despite her admission of the affair, which she made not in an apologetic tone, but rather as someone admitting something they could no longer carry inside. She mentioned months of confusion of trying to do the right thing and how every time she looked at him, she sought everything she could never be. A few days after the voicemail leaked, Papoose posted a simple photo of a pair of tiny baby shoes on a table with no caption. Zooming in, the paper revealed a court-stamped document confirming temporary full custody granted to him. The comment section was flooded with millions of reactions, some in awe, some heartbroken, and all moved. Those who believed in redemption found themselves struggling to defend her. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it had become a collective heartbreak. But what no one had anticipated was Papoose's next move. Although the industry responded in kind, a list of artists tweeted their support offers for podcasts, TV specials, and exclusive interviews. Brands that had previously ignored him now reached out with respect. But Papoose declined them all because he didn't want fame, he didn't want retribution, he just wanted peace behind the scenes. Remy had spiraled deeper. Her endorsements were frozen, her streaming numbers dropped, collaborations vanished, venues backed out. And friends were the ones who supported her, who once quietly stepped away in celebration of her come-up. But more painful than all of that was the loss of her child. Although she wasn't blocked or legally cut off, the emotional wall between her and Papoose was unbreakable. And her daughter's comfort now lived with the man who had been betrayed the most. The media attempted to keep the drama going by teasing a follow-up scandal, searching for more voicemails, and pressuring side characters to speak out. But the story had reached its natural end. And the public, worn out by the whirlwind, started to withdraw, followed by storms that brought about introspection rather than relief. Papoose withdrew entirely from social media in the weeks that followed. His final post, which featured the baby shoes unaltered, had lengthy messages from fans underneath. Some of whom thanked him, others who shared heartbreaks, and many who simply said they were praying for his peace. As for Remy, she reappeared months later, but not on stage, but at a charity event for single mothers in the When Asked By. A Bronx woman, she wore a black hoodie and no jewelry or makeup. Journalist, she just spoke a few words about what she had learned from everything.